The first scream didn't come from the dying. It came from the girl. Because she understood, before the blade ever fell, that this wasn't an arrest. This was an erasure. Torchlight flooded the ruined estate like a violent sunrise. Red cloaks, steel boots, the seal of the crown on every breastplate. And at the center of them all stood the king's executioner, tall, calm, and terrifyingly still, like a statue carved from war. The young noblewoman, 22, small but hardened by a life that never allowed softness, pressed her back against a cold stone archway. Moonlight cut across her long, dark silver hair like a curse made visible. Her violet eyes, rare enough to be whispered about in temples, scanned the courtyard as if looking for a door that didn't exist. A voice rang through the smoke. "Lord of this house, step forward." Her father, once respected for fairness even among predators, didn't beg. He didn't run. He walked out into the courtyard like a man refusing to give fear the satisfaction of being seen. He lifted his chin toward the executioner. "I demand a trial." The executioner didn't blink. The trial was held in the throne room. The verdict was decided before dawn. "That's not justice," her father said, voice steady. "That's a murder dressed in law." The executioner took one step closer, and the air itself seemed to tighten. "You are accused of treason against the royal crescent." Her father laughed once, quiet, broken. "Treason or inconvenient truth?" A hush fell. Even the soldiers shifted, uncomfortable. Then the executioner spoke again, colder than the night. "Any final words?" Her father turned his head slightly, eyes finding his daughter in the shadows, as if he'd known where she was the whole time. "Run," he mouthed silently. She shook her head, trembling. "No," she whispered. "No." The executioner's hand rose. Steel flashed. The girl lunged forward on instinct, but a soldier grabbed her, yanking her back hard enough to steal her breath. Her nails tore at the arm around her, but she was too small, too late, too human in a world ruled by monsters. Her father fell. Not dramatically, not beautifully. Just gone. And the executioner, still expressionless, looked down at the body like it was paperwork completed. Then he lifted his gaze, and he saw her. Violet eyes, silver hair, a cursed bloodline whispered in old prophecies. Something changed in him. Not his face, not his posture, but something behind his eyes, like a locked door inside him, rattled for the first time in years. He stared at her as if his mind didn't recognize her, but his nature did. She pulled free from the soldier with a wild scream. "You!" she shouted, voice cracking. "You did this!" The executioner didn't answer. He should have killed her right then. That would have been clean. Instead, he hesitated. And that hesitation, barely a heartbeat, became the first crack in the kingdom's foundation. If you're hooked already, don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this only get darker from here. And if you're watching to see whether revenge wins, stay close. She ran before the soldiers could decide what to do with her. She ran through ash-choked gardens, past the collapsed rose arches, past the last place she'd ever felt safe. A hand reached for her. Another. She slipped through them like smoke. A blade scraped her shoulder, just a warning cut meant to slow her. But she didn't stop. She ran until the trees swallowed her, until the estate lights became distant embers behind her, until her lungs burned and her legs trembled like they might snap. She didn't cry. Not yet. Because crying meant accepting it happened, and acceptance felt like betrayal. Hours later, deep in the wilderness, she collapsed beside a frozen stream, shaking. The world was silent except for her breath and the distant howl of something that wasn't an animal. Then the air shifted. The darkness thickened. A figure stepped from the trees, an old woman with cloud-white eyes, silver hair tangled with glowing beads, robes stained with incense and thyme. The girl tried to crawl backward. "Don't touch me," she rasped. The old woman didn't move closer. "You were marked before you were born," she said softly. "I don't care." "You will," the old woman whispered, "because your blood is a key." The girl's voice shook with hatred. "My blood didn't save my father!" The old woman lifted her hand. A symbol burned into the girl's wrist, sudden heat, sharp and unbearable. The girl screamed, clutching her arm. "What are you doing to me?" The old woman's expression didn't change, but her voice carried something like regret. "A seal," she said. "A blood seal." "To protect me." "To delay you." The girl stared, panting. "Delay me from what?" The old woman's head tilted slightly, as if listening to voices only she could hear. "From becoming what the throne fears most." Then she vanished into the night like she'd never been there at all. The girl lay shaking in the dirt, staring at the burning mark on her wrist, realizing with sudden clarity, they hadn't just killed her family, they'd cursed her future. Weeks passed, hunger, cold, hiding. And then, when she thought she'd finally slipped beyond the crown's reach, she felt it. Boots on leaves, a presence behind her, a man's voice, amused. "You run like you still believe in freedom." She whirled. A scarred warrior stood there, smiling too casually for someone holding death in his hand. Storm-grey eyes, confidence, a blade at his hip like it belonged there. She backed away. "No," she whispered. "Not you." He chuckled. "You remember?" "You killed my mother." "That night was loud," he said, almost bored. "People die in loud nights." She lunged at him with a broken branch. He caught her wrist effortlessly and leaned close. "You can hate me," he murmured, voice low, "but you're coming with me." She spit in his face. He wiped it slowly, still smiling. "Good," he said. "Still got teeth." And just like that, the wilderness ended. Chains replaced air, and she was dragged back to the heart of the kingdom she swore to burn down. She was thrown into a torchlit hall, marble floors, crimson banners, the scent of ancient blood lingering in the air like perfume. At the far end stood the king's executioner, the same tall figure, the same scarred face, the same emotionless grey eyes. But now his gaze snapped to her like a predator recognizing prey. The girl lifted her chin despite the chains. She refused to bow. A voice beside him, smooth and venomous, spoke from the shadows near the throne. "So," the voice purred, "the traitor's daughter still breathes." The girl turned her violet eyes toward that voice and saw a woman draped in silk and secrets, beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. Pale gold eyes, auburn hair, a smile that could ruin lives. The executioner spoke, finally, voice like steel sliding from a sheath. "She was supposed to be dead." The scarred warrior shrugged. "Fate disagreed." The executioner stepped closer until he towered over her, his gaze lowered to her wrist, to the blood seal. Something flickered in him again, fast, controlled, like rage strangled into silence. He leaned down slightly. "Who marked you?" he asked. She laughed bitterly. "Why?" she hissed. So you can kill her too? His jaw flexed. He straightened, and then, to everyone's surprise, he said, "Take her to my fortress." The scarred warrior blinked. "Your fortress?" The silk-draped woman's smile tightened. The girl stared up at him, disbelief and hatred twisting together in her chest. "You're not killing me," she spat. The executioner's eyes didn't soften. "No," he said. "You'll live." Her voice shook with rage. "You can't keep me." He leaned in close enough that only she could hear. "I can keep anything," he murmured, "and you will learn that." If you're still here, like this video, because what happens next is where the hate turns into something far worse. And comment right now, would you fight him or would you run? His fortress wasn't a prison, it was a statement. The Blood Moon Syndicate ruled the underworld of the kingdom from that place, an empire beneath the crown where the executioner's word was absolute and betrayal was repaid without mercy. They called him ruthless, they called him the King's Blade, and now the traitor's daughter lived under his roof. At first, he kept her in the lower chambers, not because he needed to, but because he wanted her to feel the weight of his control. She refused to cry, she refused to beg, she refused to give him the satisfaction, and every time he entered her cell, she met his gaze like she wished she could kill him with her eyes. One night he stopped outside her bars and spoke quietly. "You hate me," he said. She laughed, bitter. "I don't hate you," she answered. "Hate is too small. I want you to suffer." A pause. Then his voice dropped, dangerous. "You don't understand what suffering is." "Oh, I do," she snapped. "I watched you take my father's life like it was nothing." His eyes darkened. "It wasn't nothing." Her breath caught. "Then why did you do it?" He didn't answer. He turned away abruptly, like the question hit something in him he couldn't afford to feel. That's when she realized something unsettling. He wasn't unshaken. He was restrained. Days later, she was moved upstairs, to a room with clean sheets, to food that wasn't scraps, to a healer who entered quietly with warm hands and tired kindness. The healer was younger, soft-looking, but her eyes held the kind of strength that didn't need violence to prove itself. Pale blue eyes that almost turned silver when she prayed over wounds. The healer looked at the bruises on the girl's wrists and frowned. "They did this?" she asked softly. The girl swallowed. "Yes." The healer's hands glowed faintly as she tended to her skin. "I'm sorry," the healer whispered. The girl scoffed. "Sorry doesn't revive the dead." The healer didn't flinch. "I know," she said, "but it can keep the living from becoming monsters too." The girl stared at her. "Why are you kind to me?" The healer hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because I've watched my brother become something he never wanted to be." The girl's throat tightened. "Your brother?" The healer nodded toward the door, and as if summoned by the words, the executioner entered. The room temperature seemed to drop instantly. The girl's body tensed. The healer met his eyes without fear. "You're breaking her," the healer said quietly. His gaze sharpened. "She's not broken." "She will be," the healer replied. "And when she is, she won't be yours to control anymore." The executioner's jaw flexed. He stepped closer to the girl. "Eat," he ordered. She glared up at him. "Or what?" she snapped. "You'll kill me?" His voice lowered. "No," he said. "I'll keep you alive long enough to regret defying me." Her heartbeat thundered. And then, without warning, His fingers brushed her wrist, right over the blood seal. The mark flared hot. His eyes flashed crimson for half a second, then snapped back to grey. He jerked his hand away like he'd touched fire. The girl froze. The healer's eyes widened. "What was that?" the healer whispered. The executioner's voice came out rough. "Leave us." The healer hesitated. "Brother, now." The healer left reluctantly, shutting the door. The girl stared at him, breathing shallow. He stared back like he was staring at a truth he didn't want. Then he spoke, voice strained. "You're cursed." She laughed without humor. "No kidding." His eyes narrowed. "That seal, it's suppressing something." She swallowed. "What?" He took one step closer, towering over her. "A bond," he said quietly. "A blood bond." Her stomach dropped. "No," she whispered. "Don't say that." His voice turned sharp, angry, almost panicked. "It can't be," he snarled. "It makes no sense." She stood up, shaking. "You killed my father." His eyes burned. "And you think I don't remember?" Silence slammed between them. Then he looked away, voice low. "You can never be mine." The girl's voice cracked with fury. "Good," she spat, "because I'd rather die." His expression hardened, like armor snapping back into place. "Then you'll suffer," he said coldly. "And I'll make sure you live long enough to feel it." But his hands didn't move away from the door. They stayed, as if some part of him refused to leave her alone. Meanwhile, far above in the royal crescent, the king sat on his throne with calm cruelty, listening to whispers. The silk-draped advisor leaned close. "The traitor's daughter lives," she murmured. The king's cold green eyes didn't widen. He didn't gasp. He simply smiled. "So, fate insists," he said. "And the executioner?" The king's smile sharpened. "We will test his loyalty." He turned his gaze toward the shadows at the edge of the throne room. "Bring the oracle." During the blood moon eclipse, the oracle appeared, silent, unsettling, sacred. The king's voice was soft, almost polite. "I dreamed of a girl with violet eyes," he said, "standing in fire, wearing a crown made of night." The oracle's white eyes stared into nothing. Then she spoke, voice twisting the air like a curse. "The cursed blood and the cursed heart shall bind under a moon of blood. One shall rise, one shall fall. Both shall burn before dawn." The advisor inhaled sharply. The king's fingers tightened around his armrest. "Burn," he repeated thoughtfully. Then his eyes cooled. "Ensure they do." Back at the fortress, doubt began to rot inside the executioner. He received sealed orders from the king, commands to erase loyal families, destroy bloodlines that had served the throne for centuries. He followed orders his entire life, but now he hesitated. And hesitation in a world like this was treason. Worse, he began looking into the past, into the night he killed the girl's father, into the evidence he'd been shown, the documents, the accusations. And slowly, a horrifying truth formed. The rebellion wasn't real. It was forged, a lie built to erase a prophecy tied to her bloodline, which meant he hadn't executed a traitor, he'd executed an innocent man, for a king who feared losing power. The thought hollowed him out. And when he looked at the girl now, he didn't only see hatred, he saw consequence. Then betrayal struck from inside his own ranks. One night in the courtyard, the scarred warrior attacked him, fast, precise, desperate. Steel flashed. Stone cracked under their strength. The fortress guards backed away, terrified to intervene. The scarred warrior hissed through clenched teeth. Love makes leaders weak. The executioner's eyes turned crimson, his vampiric nature rising, restrained no longer. You want my throne, he growled. I want the pack, the attacker corrected himself, then sneered. The syndicate, without your weakness. They slammed into each other. The attacker drove a blade toward the executioner's throat. And in the locked chamber upstairs, the girl jolted awake with a gasp. Her wrist burned. The blood seal pulsed like a warning bell. For the first time since the curse, she felt something stir inside her. Ancient, hungry, alive. Not a wolf, not an animal. Something nocturnal, something royal. She clutched her wrist, breathing hard. What is this? She whispered. And then, like a voice inside her ribs, go. She didn't understand why. She didn't plan it. But she ran, barefoot, heart hammering, toward the courtyard. She burst outside just as the blade hovered inches from the executioner's throat. Without thinking, she grabbed the nearest weapon, a fallen spear, and hurled it. It struck the attacker's arm, knocking the blade away. The courtyard fell silent. The executioner turned, breathing hard, and saw her standing there. The girl who swore to destroy him had saved him. The attacker's eyes narrowed. You chose him, he spat. The girl's voice shook, furious at herself. I chose the enemy I can see, she snapped, not the snake hiding behind him. The executioner stared at her like he couldn't process it. Then his voice came out raw. Why? She swallowed. Because, her voice cracked. If you die, the truth dies with you. Something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not forgiveness, but a shared awareness. They were trapped in a design bigger than hatred. Now, if you're still watching, comment Blood Moon so I know you want part 2 of this universe. Because the next twist is the one that breaks everything. The king moved fast after that. The executioner was summoned to the royal crescent. He went because running would confirm guilt. He entered the throne hall and saw the advisor smiling too politely. He saw chains of silver laid out like an invitation. The king's voice was gentle. My loyal enforcer, he said. Bring me the traitor's daughter. The executioner didn't kneel. A gasp rippled through the court. The king's cold eyes narrowed. You forget yourself. The executioner's voice was calm, but shaking beneath restraint. I remember myself, he said. That's why I can't obey you anymore. The advisor's smile vanished. The king rose slowly. You dare defy me? The executioner stepped forward. The Veil Rebellion was a lie, he said. The documents were forged. The father was innocent. The room went silent. The king's expression didn't crack. Only his eyes hardened like ice. Proof? He asked softly. The executioner's jaw flexed. You don't need proof, he said. You needed fear. and you used me to deliver it." The king's voice dropped. "Chain him." Silver snapped around the executioner's wrists. He didn't resist. He only stared at the throne with a look that finally held emotion. Not rage, regret. "You made me a weapon," he said quietly. The king leaned forward, voice like a whisper. "And now, I will break you." He turned his gaze toward the scarred warrior, standing at the edge of the hall, pretending loyalty. "Bring me her heart," the king ordered. "If she lives, the prophecy lives." The scarred warrior bowed. "With pleasure." Far from the throne room, in an abandoned temple under an eclipse shadow, the girl stood before the oracle. The oracle's voice was tired. "I marked you," she admitted, "because I was forced." The girl's eyes burned. "You cursed me." "I sealed you," the oracle corrected, "so your awakening would be delayed." "Why?" The oracle's blind eyes fixed on her. "Because the throne fears what you are." The girl swallowed, trembling. "And what am I?" The oracle's voice lowered. "The Night Sovereign," she whispered. "The blood heir, meant to dethrone the false king." The girl's breath hitched. "That's impossible." The oracle shook her head slowly. "It's inevitable." The girl clenched her fists. "Then break the seal." The oracle's voice turned grave. "It breaks only when you accept what you are and who you're bound to." The girl's jaw tightened. "No," she snapped. "Not him." The oracle's lips trembled. "Your hate strengthens the bond," she said. "Every time you resist, fate grips tighter." The girl's eyes filled with furious tears. "He murdered my father." "And he was used," the oracle whispered. "Just like you were." Silence. Then the temple doors exploded inward, soldiers pouring in, led by the scarred warrior. His storm-grey eyes locked on the girl. "Found you," he said with a grin. The girl's wrist burned hotter than ever. The seal cracked, light, silver and ancient, surged through her veins like wildfire. Her violet eyes flashed, then turned luminous, moon-silver bright. The soldiers froze. "What is she?" one whispered. The girl's voice came out calm, terrifying. "Finished running." She moved, not with claws, not with animal fury, but with something regal and lethal, like night itself bending around her. The scarred warrior lunged, confident. She caught his wrist mid-strike and twisted. He cried out, staggering back, shocked. "You're not supposed to be awake," he hissed. She stepped forward. "I wasn't supposed to survive either," she replied. He fled, bloodied in pride more than body, escaping to warn the king. Back at the throne hall, the executioner hung in chains, beaten, exhausted, refusing to beg. The doors trembled, then blew open. Cold wind swept in. Silver light filled the hall, and she walked in. Small, silver-haired, eyes glowing like the moon's judgment, every courtier stepped back instinctively. The king's face tightened. "You," he said softly. "The curse failed." The girl's voice carried through the hall like a blade. "Release him." The king laughed once. "You think you command me?" She walked closer. "I think you're afraid." The advisor moved forward, voice sharp. "She's a monster." The girl turned her gaze toward the advisor, and something in that woman's poise faltered, just for a moment. The girl spoke with cold clarity. "You forged the lies," she said. "You killed my family with whispers." The advisor's smile returned, brittle. "And you'll die for it." The king raised his hand. Dark power gathered, ancient blood magic meant to crush. The hall lights flickered. The executioner lifted his head, eyes crimson and burning. "Don't," he rasped. The girl didn't look back. "Stay alive," she said quietly. "For once." Then the battle erupted. Not a gore fest, not a messy slaughter. A collision of power, light against shadow, truth against tyranny. The king's magic slammed like invisible chains. The girl pushed through it, shaking but unbreakable. The advisor drew a hidden blade, lunging. The healer, who'd followed, trembling but brave, shouted a prayer, light flashing from her hands. The advisor stumbled, snarling. The scarred warrior returned, trying to strike from behind. The executioner broke his chains with a roar, intercepting him, slamming him into the floor. "You betrayed me," the executioner growled. The scarred warrior spit blood and laughed. "I save this syndicate from your weakness." The executioner's eyes burned. "You didn't save it," he said. "You sold it." He knocked him aside and turned toward the throne. The king staggered, shocked that his enforcer stood free. "You were mine," the king hissed. The executioner stepped forward, voice like thunder. "I was never yours," he said. "You just raised me to forget." The girl faced the king, eyes bright, expression steady. "You built your throne on stolen blood," she said. "Now drown in truth." The king's power faltered, his control breaking under the weight of exposure. He dropped to one knee. Not dead. Defeated. The girl raised her hand. The court held its breath. Then she delivered the final judgment, not with cruelty, with inevitability. The false king fell beneath the blood moon. Dawn rose over the kingdom like a promise it didn't deserve. The throne room was shattered, but the air felt lighter, as if the world itself exhaled. The girl stood trembling, drained, staring at the executioner. He stepped toward her slowly, careful, as if afraid she'd disappear. She swallowed. "I still hate you," she whispered. He nodded, eyes wet but controlled. "I know." She clenched her jaw. "I watched you kill my father." His voice broke, barely. "I watched him die too," he said. "And I hated myself for believing the lie." Silence stretched. Then she spoke again, softer, almost unwilling. "You were my enemy." He stepped closer. "I was your executioner," he whispered. "And now?" she asked, voice shaking. He lowered his gaze to her wrist, where the seal was gone. "Now," he said, voice raw. "I'm yours, if you'll have me. Not as a master, not as a weapon. As a man who finally chooses." Her throat tightened. She didn't forgive him completely. Not yet. But she understood something dangerous. They were both victims of the same fire, and surviving it together was the most rebellious thing either of them could do. The healer approached quietly, tears in her eyes. "It's over," she whispered. The girl looked at the shattered throne. "No," she said. "It's beginning." In the aftermath, the court searched for the advisor. Gone. Vanished into shadow with her secrets. And the scarred warrior? Escaped. Wounded. Humiliated. But alive. A future war waiting to happen. The girl stepped toward the throne, not because she wanted power, but because if she didn't take it, someone worse would. She sat, silver hair falling like a banner of defiance, moon-bright eyes steady, a queen born from ashes. The executioner stood beside her, no longer chained to a king, only to a choice. The kingdom watched them with fear and awe, because everyone knew love didn't save them. Love weaponized them. And under the next blood moon, the world would either kneel or burn. If you want the next chapter of this universe, subscribe now and comment, should she forgive him or should she rule alone?